Good morning. I'm Constance. Before I start, I would like to ask you to close your eyes and think about the question, who are you? You may now open your eyes. The question may seem simple to you, and you may feel that you already have the answer. However, this is a question I have asked myself my whole life. Since nursery, when I was 18 months old, I have always been in an international school. Therefore, none of my classes were homogeneous. But since primary school, I could feel that I was different from others. Can you guess what ethnicity I am from? You may say that I am Russian or from Xinjiang, like many people say on the streets. However, I am biracial. Half of my parentage is British and the other half is Chinese. Therefore, I have had an English name and a Chinese name since the moment I was born. And these names are equally important to me, which I understand is different to many of you. Given that I am biracial, some of you may say that I am half-half, or 50% of one race and 50% of the other. However, I am here to say that this is incorrect. Being biracial does not mean that you're a certain percentage of one race and a certain percentage of another. And it definitely does not mean that you're from one race only. Being biracial means that you are fully from both races, and you should be perceived as fully from both races, as you are 200% of yourself. But being biracial also means that sometimes we encounter difficulties that not everybody encounters. For instance, I had to choose to hold a passport between one of the two identities and cultures I am from. And this was what led me to think deeper into who I am. And it also helped me understand the importance of understanding your own identity. So let me give you an example, or let me give you some background information. I have lived in China my whole life. My first words were Chinese, and all my friends are in China. Would you call me British? No. On the other hand, I studied English as a first language, as I tend to be better at English than Chinese. I understand more British puns than Chinese puns, and I barely know anything about Chinese history. Would you still call me someone who is Chinese? So, during my life in China, I have actually experienced many occasions and situations where I feel unaccepted. For instance, when I am walking on the streets, someone may look at me weirdly and point at me and say, 外国人. 外国人 means foreigner. And the term foreigner is actually not offensive at all. However, when it is said to you in your own country or somewhere you call home, it makes you feel unaccepted. Imagine if you were walking on the streets in your own country. For instance, for many of you, it may be China. And someone walks up close to you and looks at you and then says, 外国人, or foreigner. How would you feel? Or, for instance, when my coach calls me 小老外. Although I have adapted to react to this name as I respect my coach lots, every time I hear this name, a feeling of being the outsider escalates within me. Another example may be when, if you lived in China, you might have, during COVID times, you might have also experienced it. If you hold a passport rather than a Chinese ID card, when you go down to do your COVID test in the compound, they would have to type in your information rather than take a photo, because the system could not process a photo of a passport. As typing in information took longer than taking a picture, obviously, sometimes I would hear people in the line behind me sigh, because it wouldn't take too long. Although I can understand it, it made me frustrated, and it made me feel that I was not accepted even more. But I am not the only person who is experiencing difficulties with my identity. A famous Chinese blogger, Nina, has also experienced difficulties. You may know her, and here is a short video.
我今天看见一煎饼摊，本来想买一煎饼来着，然后一到那儿，人家跟我说这煎饼40块钱，我说这煎饼怎么40块钱？他说现在煎饼都这价钱。那我就心想，你坑了别人老外，你可坑不了我。
So actually, Nina, she is half African and half Chinese, but she perceives herself to be Chinese. Therefore, when others see her as foreign, maybe from her looks, she will feel frustrated, as she herself sees her identity as Chinese. Nevertheless, I do realize that there are many benefits to being biracial. Being biracial actually allows me to be more adaptable in situations in my future life. As I have grown with two cultures, I am more understandable of the customs they may have. For instance, a very distinct custom may be gift giving. In China, if I were to visit a friend or a family member, I would maybe bring them milk or fruits and snacks. However, if I were to be in Britain or England, I would probably bring them a bottle of wine, as it is customary to bring that bottle. If I was to bring alcohol on both occasions, I would typically bring one bottle of wine in Britain, as it is customary to drink that bottle of wine between the host and the guest. However, in China, I would probably bring baijiu, or 2 bottles of wine, to show my generosity. So, growing up in as a biracial, I have seen these customs at a very young age, and therefore they are engraved into my mind. However, if you were to learn them maybe at a later stage of your life, it may be harder for you to understand them, or harder for you to adapt to use them. Growing up in a multiracial environment actually gave me the opportunity to develop my language skills in a more natural way. I and many biracial people have actually learned both our languages the way you learned your first language. For most of you, I would think that is Chinese again. Do you remember how you learned Chinese or your first language? Did you have to memorize each character like you memorize vocabulary for English? Did you have to go over grammar each night to make sure that you could use it correctly? Or did it just come to you when you were learning to speak with your parents? The last one is how many people learn their first language, and it is actually how I've learned both my languages. Not only does it bring a natural tone to your speech, also embedded with it are the phrases you learn to use and prevent. For instance, you may say a phrase in Chinese, and it is perfectly acceptable and understandable to your community. However, if I were to translate it to a different language, for example, English, or if I were to use it in a different country, for example, Britain or America, it may be too direct for them, and it may come off as offensive. So many biracial people actually may feel that they don't fit in anyway. But because we have learned to adapt so quickly and successfully, we actually fit in everywhere. So you may ask me, who am I? When people used to call me 外国人 on the streets, I would say 中国人. Not because I felt totally Chinese, but because I didn't want to feel like an outsider in the space I called home, or in the country I called home. People who have lived overseas for a long time may also feel the same difficulty. They may feel that they don't belong in a certain area anymore. So where do I belong? Throughout the endless nights of thinking about where I belong, and the infinite hours of daydreaming of what life would be like if I wasn't a biracial child, I became to understand that it was the different cultures and the diversified environment that shaped me to be who I am today. I am unique, and being unique is the best part of being human. I've grown and learned that it is the cultures and the races that have mixed into me to make me who I am. But I am not from those cultures only. I belong to a growing multiracial community, and I am a world citizen. Therefore, I want to thank my parents for overcoming the obstacles and defeating them to be together, and also for their continuous support in the discovery of who I am. So if you were to ask me who I am now, or what my identity is, I would say that I am a world citizen.